Chapter 30, Annotate Cross-Sections. And it looks like we're starting to get close to the end of this Road 1 class. So let's keep rolling. Okay, I guess in the previous couple chapters we talked just like a little bit about annotation of cross-sections. I think we'll start off talking about some of this automatic annotation, and then we'll talk about labeling cross-sections also, or like manually annotating a cross-section, I guess you could say. And just to show you how that works as well, just like in the plan view, when you use those labels, it knows the elevation and offset and those kinds of things, but it's not like the automatic annotation that IDOT uses annotates everything. Let me just remove the annotation like we talked. Remember earlier we talked a little bit in a previous chapter about you can annotate, one particular item like that way, right? Or you can do like the file-based annotation, whatever is set up for the file in the IDOT environment in this case. And this is where all this comes from. Okay, so I'm just going to say no to annotating everything, and then it says annotation group. And there's a few that IDOT has set up. The most common one is this cross-section grid with annotations. That's one that we're going to use, and you'll see that you get the grid and here, I'll just click on it. So we get all this. We get the grid, the majors and the minor grids, all these offset labels at four types of locations. At the center line, the edge of pavement, the inside of the ditch, and the limit of construction. Those four locations you will get an automatic offset and elevation when you annotate using that method I just showed you. And what I mean by that is, and this is where it's important when you're developing your template to make sure you've used the right feature definitions, because if you don't, then you won't get any of this annotation, and that's pretty common for people not to, and then to get into the cross-section view here and not have their annotation show up there, and they'll be confused as to why are they not showing up. But if I go to the template and I look at those four locations I just mentioned, like center line, for example, this is what's important here, that this particular feature definition was used. Now you could have gone through and selected that manually, or ideally what you're doing when you're and this is more like if you're creating points from scratch. Most of the IDOT components have this built into it, but sometimes they'll be out of date. And actually, I think initially in the environment, this one was out of date, and I had to go through and update it, just our copy of the environment. It didn't have the proper, or the feature definition did not match what was set up in the environment. So anyway, there, edge of pavement, it's specifically looking at right there, road, proposed edge of pavement. That's what makes the annotation work, along with limits of construction. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the the automatic type. Now you can delete these or move them around, do things like that, but of course you want to be careful with that, or I would say early on in the development of your project. I wouldn't get too carried away with some of this manual work, because you might end up making changes, and it's just a label. It can be re-annotated very easily at any point. So you might, if I was just getting started on a project and I saw this offset was on top of that existing right of way, I would not mess with it early on. Early on in a project, you're worried about getting the thing designed properly, not as to what those final labels are going to look like in the phase 2 completed plans. Especially with modeling, your thinking on those kinds of issues really change. Really, when you have a modeling job, you're concentrating on getting that model, that 3D model, just right, because everything else is really just a visualization and automatic annotation from it. It's the result of the model. The most important thing is getting the design of the model correct. Okay, so that was. Oh, I wanted to check one thing. Probably not a great place to be checking things, but I just wanted to see here. I wasn't positive if I select that ditch, if that automatically annotates. I didn't know if that was set up that way. No, it's not. Okay. Yeah, things like that. If there's some type of annotation that's missing, we could put in a request to IDOT, or I could go into the environment in our company's copy of the environment and change things. Ideally, we pass along the word to IDOT and let them make the updates if we feel like they're needed, and they may or may not agree. Okay. Civil labeler. We talked a little bit about this yesterday, or in a previous chapter. This is something like, again, I had mentioned this in a previous chapter. This is really brand new to this, I think, this last environment. This thing we're eventually really going to like. It's really not set up for the IDOT environment yet, so I'm really not going to use it. But that's going to be really nice. But what we are going to be using is just place label. Where'd that thing go? Let's see here. Edit. Oh, next to it. It's right in front of me. Okay, it's under notes. It's not under text. So, like I was saying, if you want to place these additional labels, I would recommend if it's something like station offset, or offset elevation, I would use place label. Here you can again use the cell, and then the way this is going to work, pretty simple. Just snap to whatever point that you want. You might, if you want to match up the type of labeling they did up above, you can change that to vertical, and data point to accept, and there it knows what your offset and your elevation is, which is pretty nice. And I don't want to say. I was going to say I believed if you made a change, if you have these associations turned on, then I think that that label might move with it. Don't quote me on that. I would probably need to try that out myself. But like I said, personally, in the beginning of a project, I don't go crazy with this manual type work. It's just not worth it. I kind of wait till the very end to label everything very thoroughly type thing, because you never know what kind of changes you're going to make along the way. It's just a label. Okay. Should we leave it there? I think so. I could go ahead and, I don't think I'm going to. I could give the example. I could show you that it works, but you could try it for yourself, and you would see that if you change your profile or some other aspect of your model, you're going to notice that a lot of this auto annotation does not move. And so let's say I raise the profile, you'd see the pavement up higher, but you may just have to go in, remove the annotation, and then re-annotate it. There is one other type that you might find of use I want to mention real quick, and it has to do with the guardrail. If you want your guardrail to show on your cross sections, there's really two different ways. One would be to build the guardrail right into your template, and there's a component for guardrail that's already developed. I would recommend going that way because that way you can use point controls, and you can actually place that guardrail exactly where it's surveyed, which is pretty awesome. I'm talking even vertically. But maybe, your survey may not contain that level of detail, possibly, and you might just want to put guardrail at some standard width or something. And so if you were to use the feature definition in the plan view, and so so it knows that there's some guardrail out there, there is an additional annotation group called guardrail down there at the bottom, and I'm going to accept it. We're not going to get it right here because I didn't have the feature. I didn't draft in the guardrail in the plan view using that feature definition. But if you do, that's pretty cool that it'll actually place it in the design file if you use this method, the guardrail is going to be at a standard height. It's not going to be the actual height because it doesn't know vertically what the height is. But if when you put in your survey request, if you did have the survey picked up by shooting the top of the rail element or some known location, a consistent location on the rail element, then you can develop your template that way, and so you get that guardrail at the proper height and offset, and then you can make those determinations even off your cross section as to in your design process, if you need to, say, remove the rail element when you're adding shoulders. I just had something like that recently. Or if you need to call for the guardrail to be vertically adjusted in the field. That works real well too. But again, you have to use the template for that method, or you just get a standard height using this annotation method. So let's go ahead and end it there, and that will be the end of this chapter.